And welcome to Lounge Rōnin. All things, everything. And on this episode, we are going to discuss the mainstream academia and the lost race of giants. And before we get into it, please make sure you hit that like button and ring that notification bell. Now, I've been having some multiple technical difficulties over here on my end for some odd reason. So I apologize for anyone who has been waiting and was a bit frustrated. So I apologize for that. But we are back up and running. And we are good to go. So, you know, I've been covering a lot of stuff regarding the mainstream narrative in regards to our true history. And I know for some people, they'll kind of scoff and roll their eyes at the idea of giants, but, I'm a firm believer that, you know, giants are a real thing. Oh, great. Rumble, we're good. Thank you. I've been trying to get my Rumble up and running. All right, sorry, I got distracted there. But we're all up and running on everywhere. Uh, I'm also streaming on Kick now, uh, Twitch. Um, so I don't mean to get distracted, but let me just post that out on the socials. But like as I was saying, like you know, we need to accept the reality of our situation in regards to um, the mainstream narrative in our true history. And when I was back home for a funeral, I was talking with my my godmother, and she was kind of critical of the fact that I believe in biblical texts and biblical information. Uh, and it's like, I used to not be, but when I started seeing such said biblical text be confirmed with that, actual data and archaeological evidence, I had to start being more open-minded and accept the reality of the situation. And so that's part of the reason why I feel that it's necessary for us to um, really be open-minded and understand that at this point in time, whether or not the things that are being um, the information and stuff that's being disclosed during the UAP stuff, I'm not here to tell you whether it's a psyop or not, and I'm not here to talk about that information. What I'm here to talk about is information that there is valuable data to be examined. valuable data that proves that the mainstream narrative is lying to us. And I'm just here to kind of prove that information. I'm here to provide that stuff for you guys and make your own decisions on how you want to interpret that information and data. But the reality is that we can't continue to pretend uh, as if this isn't the reality that we're actually in. And I know for some people, they want to be like, oh, well, it is what it is. And I'm not for that. I don't vibe with that idea. I don't think it's healthy for us. But we are living in a time where um, to speak critical and to speak open-mindedly is deemed heresy. It's deemed you're deemed a threat. And I think that many of us can relish in the idea that at least for those of us who are more than willing to maintain their individuality and maintain their ability to speak for themselves and think for themselves, they're not being caught up in the semantics of the propaganda. They're not being caught up in the lies. They're not being caught up in the domestication of your thought process, your individuality. And that's what's, frustrating, I think, for many of us, whether you want to call it the conspiracy community or, alternative researchers and archaeologists and, whatever you may have it. These individuals, including myself, and I'm not, trying to be some, big guy in the conspiracy bubble or anything of that nature. But I do think it's important for us that, as we continue to speak out and be critical of this information, that we maintain our integrity, that we maintain our respect for ourselves, for individuals who don't necessarily agree with us, and for those who, ridicule and harass us. And what I mean by respect is I mean that we don't stoop to their level of engagement and behavior. And that's something that I think is really important that we all as individuals are mindful about. And I'm not, and I know it's hard, we're all humans, but we really need to be more open-minded with the information that we are getting and do our own research and be critical of it. And even the things that I'm going to be talking about here, I'm not expecting everyone to believe everything that I believe. And I not necessarily I believe everything, all the information that I read. I look at consistencies in the information and I go from there. I don't, believe it all wholeheartedly. But there are some things that, I believe only because, well, there's enough evidence to prove that, hey, this was real. This existed. Whether or not it still exists now, is remains to be unseen. And it even goes with the conversation we're going to have now, talking about giants, in particular giants in North America. We it's so funny that uh, the history that we're being taught is such a lie. It's so disingenuous that it preys on the notion that you won't ask questions. And and here we are now where I'm going to be asking questions about, well, um why is it that the Smithsonian has a contingency program in place for any time they uncover giant bones or they are brought bones of that clearly are of giants. They either destroy it or they hide the information, they obfuscate it, they pay people off. And the reason is that the Smithsonian is a federal agency. It's part of the federal government. And the federal government will dictate the narrative that needs to be sown and spread throughout this country. And I'm not trying to get political or anything of that nature. But I think it's important that I make sure that I remind everyone that, when it comes to our academics, especially when it comes to archaeology and history, it really is, funded and co-opted by the U.S. government. And as unfortunate as that may be, we as individuals just need to be mindful of that and stay vigilant. But without further ado, let's get into this uh, presentation. I see we have some people over on Rumble that are watching. I really appreciate it. If you were here earlier during my technical difficulties, I apologize. Thank you for coming back. If you would so kindly as hit the like button and maybe leave me a thumbs up right now if you're feeling good and vibing with the conversation we're going to have today. Uh, so yeah, let's get into this. I know it's been a minute since I've been live streaming, and I really want to talk about this stuff. So let's do it. Alrighty. All right. Now this article is written by Jason and Sarah. It was updated March 13th, 2021. And it goes, the establishment has already acknowledged a lost race of giants. Part 1. One of the most controversial subjects regarding ancient prehistoric cultures of North America concerns what we refer to as the unique physical types, UPT. For the purpose of what follows, these UPTs are often gigantic humanoid skeletons with hyper elongated or high vaulted crania, occasionally extra or pathological detentions, including several reports of double or triple rows of teeth, and are usually discovered in the burial mounds and associated graveyards of Adena Hopewell, uh, Archaic cultures, and Southeastern ceremonial complex. Accounts of lost race of giants. It is common today for alternative history researchers to tell the story of how these beings were discovered en masse throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries. Historians, antiquarians, and archaeologists recorded the discovery of unique physical types all over the United States, with a large concentration found in the mounds and earthworks of the Ohio River Valley and along the Mississippi River. These accounts can be found in a number of country townships and state histories, as well as anthropological literature from both inside and outside the Smithsonian Institution. Now, as I was saying, the Smithsonian Institution. But before we get into it any further, let's learn more about what is a UPT. Okay. Adena Axis Mundi and large skeletal remains. Archaeology of the Grave Creek Mound. Part 1. Now, this was written again by Jason and Sarah, and it was written December 2017, December 14th, 2017. Now we're going to keep on going on with what's going on with these mounds in the Ohio River Valley. So the city of Moundsville is located along the Ohio River in Marshall County, West Virginia. From the time of the European settlement in the 1770s, Moundsville was regarded by antiquaries as one of the most significant ancient sites in North America. For it was here that the Adena Mound builders and their descendants constructed the largest ceremonial center in the upper Ohio Valley, including Grave Keek Mound, several earthworks enclosures, and as many as 47 additional mounds. There were also stone mounds averaging 4 feet in diameter, crowning the hills around Moundsville, variously interpreted as lookouts, caves, and sacred wells. The ritual landscape of Moundsville continued across the Ohio River in Belmont County, Ohio, where Henry Schoolcraft surveyed the remains of still another stone mound and described a circular earthen enclosure or henge. The Grave Keek Mound is a massive structure originally between 62 and 65 feet high and 240 feet in diameter, with a flat top 60 feet in diameter. Surrounding the mound and located directly at the base was a large circular ditch, 40 feet wide and 4 to 5 feet deep. Apologies. With a single causeway entrance at the south. So here we have a map depicting the mound. It's beautiful. It's like concentric circles. And this is for my podcast listeners. And you, if you're a '90s baby, you might remember that game where it was like a round thing and you had to press different parts of it when it lit up. If you know what I'm talking about, it'll ring a bell, and it looks exactly like that. Now imagine seeing that in its totality during the height of its time. It would have been an incredible sight to see. So I think one thing that's absolutely incredible and fascinating is to see the level of ingenuity. And even though it's mounds with dirt, if you look at the what is it, Snake Mound, which is one of the most advanced astrological um, calendars here in North America. So we have to think about the fact that some of this technology, some of these archaeological sites and these cities. I wish I had grabbed some from online that I have on my Twitter page. Some of the mounds and how they looked, and it's absolutely incredible. Uh, and so when you look at the design of this and in the uh, intrinsic circles around it, it almost kind of reminds me of a little bit of the Recock structure over in Africa. Like a kind of reminds me of a Atlantis in a sense, where Atlantis had the circles around it with water within each circle. It's really fascinating. And it says here below a map of the Portsmouth Earthworks Group C, a Hopewell Culture series of mounds located in Greenup County, Kentucky. It is part of a larger earthworks complex, the Portsmouth Earthworks, located across the Ohio River in Portsmouth, Ohio. It is also known as the Biggs Site. Well, shout out to anybody out in Kentucky. If you've been to this site, please let us know. The Adena constructed many circular ditches and earthen banks throughout the Ohio Valley, and some featuring interior mounds, practices typically interpreted as the expression of cosmological principles, as I was saying a little bit about the snake mound, which from the sky looks like a giant snake. Bones of uncommonly large size. The large Grave Creek mound proved to be an irresistible attraction to early antiquarians and curiosity seekers in the natural Aborigine history of Tennessee. Now, note the word Aborigine. Um, Let me finish this and then I'll get into that. Uh, in the natural and Aborigine history of Tennessee, John Hayward mentioned near Wheeling in Virginia on Grave Creek and on the lands of on the lands of Mr. Tomlins is one of mound of a conical form 75 feet high. In the interior of this mound, human bones were found of uncommonly large size. Now, you're probably asking yourself and wondering, why would he title his book In the Natural and Aboriginal History of Tennessee? Um, Now, for those of you who are not familiar with the true history of North America, in particular, the United States, uh, then you're not aware of the fact that uh, North America was already inhabited by dark skinned individuals. To make it easier for you, black people. Uh, I know that might lose some people, but the United States, North America, was inhabited by black people. Um, if you are curious to learn more about that, I highly recommend you check out Dan Calloway's YouTube channel or you check out his book. It was told to you in reverse. And he pretty much covers and explains how the slave trade was uh, pretty much told in a lie. And the history of America is far, far more interesting than what the mainstream media and the mainstream academia is portraying. So, I highly recommend if that's something you're interested in, check out Dan Calloway's work on YouTube. You will not be disappointed. Now let's continue. Here we have a picture of Grave Creek Mound. All right. Now, according to Delph Norona, yet another early chronicler states that the mound had been so far opened as to ascertain that it contains many thousands of human skeletons, some of them of uncommon large size. In 1838, the owner of the mound initiated amateur excavations, beginning with the digging of a tunnel from the north side of the mound 4 feet above the ground level. As the tunnel passed through the body of the tumulus, numerous deposits of ashes and bones were encountered, possibly representing human cremations placed in the mound over the course of its construction. And here we have Ascending the Creek Mound. Now, I did one live stream covering how some of these giants were buried in these clay caskets that were heated. I don't remember particularly specifically why, but check out that live stream if you're interested in understanding some of the burial practices. The tunnel eventually reached the lower vault, dug 7 to 8 feet deep into the natural surface, consisting of a rectangular 8 by 12-foot structure with log supports and log covering. The tomb contained the remains of two individuals. One of the skeletons encountered in the chamber was buried with 650 shell beads and an expanded center bar gorget 6 inches in length. According to Thomas Townsend, the interior maxillary bone or lower jaw was large and strong, while the second skeleton was without artifacts and the bulk much smaller and more delicate. These observations resulted in the first skeleton being labeled male and the second female. Both burials were extended on the backs, and the smaller skeleton was 5 foot 9 inches in length. The lower tomb had originally been connected with a timber-lined passageway inclined 10 to 15 degrees from the north side of the mound, leading downward to the tomb. Following the discovery of the lower chamber, a shaft was sunk from the top of the mound, and another burial chamber discovered near the top of the primary mound, consisting of a log tomb 18 feet long and 8 feet wide. The chamber contained a single burial with marginalia shell beads, between 60 and 150 rectangular mica fragments, and long diamond-shaped limestone gorget. The 5 copper bracelets, 3 on one wrist and 2 on the other. The mica pieces were perforated and found so as to suggest that they were attached to a garment or burial shroud. Both the upper and lower chambers were covered with stones, some featuring cup mark indications as found at many Adena sites. And here we have a picture of a ritually killed stone gorget. This fragment was found along the banks of Patuxent's River in the Maryland, but the slate is from central Ohio. Skeletons sitting in wait. Significantly, when a museum was constructed inside the mound, the lower chamber was expanded to 28 feet in diameter and 9 feet in height, and 10 inches more skeletons were discovered, all in sitting posture. These were probably burials deposited following the initial construction of the timber tomb, since the vault has been connected to the interior by the passageway for an unknown length of time. The museum was eventually abandoned, and the collapse of the central shaft tunnel uncovered several more features in the mound. In 1859, Will de Haas published a pamphlet through the American Association for the Advancement of Science, requesting funding for the excavation of 2 more burial chambers that had been revealed by the collapse. De Haas discovered these little-known discoveries in a letter written to Henry Schoolcraft in 1856. Quote, 2 or perhaps 3 additional vaults have been discovered located about midway between the upper and lower chambers. These new vaults appear to occupy positions outside of the shaft, made by Messrs. Tomlinson and Biggs. In addition to this discovery, 1 or more skeletons have been found on the remains of what might properly be called an altar or fireplace. Now, Jason Jarrell and Sarah Farmer are investigative historians and avocational archaeologists. One thing I found really interesting here is the burial. Now, in Peru and in I should say in Central America, the in Central America, a lot of the burials of the elongated skulls. One of the interesting things about those burials is that even with those burials as well, the bodies are buried sitting up as well, which I find very peculiar. I think that's a very interesting connection right there. And another thing I find really interesting is that if you notice, and we'll get back to it real quick, um, that if you notice that, and we're gonna get back to that main article, one of the photos, and they even mentioned it in the at the beginning of the article, that some of these um, the heads, or the skulls, I should say, seem to be elongated. Now, like if you look at this picture here above, now for my podcast listeners, what you see here is a giant with red hair, but he has an elongated skull. Now, I'm very curious if there is a connection between um, the humanoids that are found in, I should say, the extinct humanoids supposedly that are found in Peru or in Central America with the elongated skulls, and the giants of North America, because they seem to have elongated skulls as well. And if you're interested in learning more about that, um, I did do a live stream discussing essentially uh, my theory, speculation, conspiracy hat that there is a elongated bloodline of European and American descent that's still alive and active as of now. So if that's something you're interested in, I highly recommend you check out that episode. But what I find really interesting is I'm just looking at the comparisons in regards to the burials of these giants and the burials in Central America. Now, I just think there's a little something there to keep in mind of and be aware of. Uh, if you're here right now, shout out to the Rumble watchers. Hit that like button, please. It would be greatly appreciated. Hit it up, ladies and gents. Uh, and leave a thumbs up if you're enjoying the live stream right now. And any thoughts on what we're talking about right now. If you guys have ever heard about information about giants, any actual archaeological evidence about it, do you think it's all a bit of nonsense? Please leave a comment. Let me know what you're thinking. But like I was saying, I just think that there is clearly a correlation here, uh, and I'm not no expert or anything like that, but I definitely think there is a correlation. I think it's something to be to consider. All right, let's get back into it. So here we're gonna before we right when we touched on what UPTs are, we're gonna have a couple of examples here below. So let's continue. Kentucky. From a mound on the farm of Edinburgh's near Franklin, we exhumed in May 1841, at a depth of over 12 feet, several human skeletons. One of extraordinary dimensions was found between what appeared to have been two logs, covered with a wooden slab. Many of the bones were entire. The under jaw bone was large enough to fit over the jaw, flesh and all, of any common man of the present day. The thigh bones were full 6 inches longer than those of any man in Simpson County. Teeth, arms, ribs, and all gave evidence of a giant former race. And this is in 1841. That's what's very interesting about it. Yeah, that's what's really interesting, is that all of these, whether it's, the Peruvian archives book from the 1800s, talking about elongated skulls. I mean, it's the further and further you go back, the more and more, that information is being spoken about. Let's continue. And here we have a picture, a artist representation of a North American giant by Marcia K. Moore. Now, what's interesting about this giant, it has the elongated skull, very similar to the elongated skulls of Paracas. And even the elongated skulls of Paracas, some of them have red hair. And if we scroll all the way back up to the top, you have a depiction of a giant here with red hair. So all I'm saying is that there obviously was, just put on your tinfoil, Koofy, and right along with me for this one. There must have been, at some point, we had humans with elongated skulls, so humanoids with elongated skulls, and then we also had giants with elongated skulls. And perhaps they come from the same family because they both have red hair. And I don't think red hair is indigenous to Central and South America, but I could be wrong. But in the other information that I've talked about in terms of the extinct humanoid elongated skull race, there clearly must have been a split. Whether or not that was by intelligent design, whether we're talking the Anunnaki or anything of that kind of ideology, I don't know. But there clearly was at one point two species of humanoid in nature that had elongated skulls that occupied, it seems like, a maybe the entire globe. Because there are elongated skulls that have been found in Russia, France, Romania, uh, Italy, Africa, and some of these, they are um, using cranial deformation, which is you are purposely deforming the cranial. And many of these cultures that practice that, they're doing it to emulate what they perceive as being uh, more upper class. So in their mind, and I would speculate that this would be coming from either their gods or what they worshipped, that having an elongated skull was considered more upper class. It was more, you're an elite. Uh, so I don't know necessarily what the connection is there, but I personally feel that there is definitely a connection to be made uh, there. And I think that it's just fascinating to me. Uh, and if you head over to like Brian Forrester's Instagram page, or even if you check out Marcia K. Moore and her designs, I believe it's a woman. um, there are even actual live replicas of what these skulls and what the faces and structures would look like, and it's absolutely fascinating. So I really recommend people take a look into that. But I wanted to double back real quick, and I wanted to look into the Ohio Valley a little bit more. And then after we finish looking at the examples, we're going to double back to another thing as well. Um, so I apologize. I'm in the zone and I got a little ahead of myself, but I want to touch back to the Ohio Valley because I think there's some important information in regards to the Ohio Valley that we could definitely look at. So let me pull that baby up. And the reason why I want to look more about this, look more into the Ohio Valley, is because it seems like the Ohio Valley is rich. Oh, and look, there it is in um in a lot of archaeological mysteries. So, and here we have case in point. Remember, I was telling you about the snake mound and or serpent mound, and here's a picture of it above. This article is by Jason and Sarah. Again, this is part two of the Adena cultures, and it's titled "Symbolism of the Great Serpent in the Adena and Hopewell Cultures," Part 2. Now, they haven't said necessarily whether or not the Adena and the Hopewell cultures are necessarily, are they the Aborigines or are they the Indians, or are they talking about the giants? I'm speculating that they're talking about the giants, but I could be wrong. Recently, a debate has developed in the Ohio archaeological community over the age and cultural affiliations of the Great Serpent Mound in Adams County, Ohio. So, what does the evidence really show regarding the origins of this mysterious earthwork? Ohio and the Illinois Hopewell. In the Ohio Valley, serpent symbolism was also present in the contemporaries and successors of the Adena and the Hopewell culture, 2000 BC to 500 AD. Christopher Carr and Robert McCord have recently published a fascinating study of four composite creature effigies from the Hopewellian Turner earthworks in the Little Miami Valley. Little Miami. Must be quite a party over there. The four effigies feature elements of rattlesnakes, fish, salamanders, crocodiles, and bear or badger. Carr and McCord suggest that the Turner effigies could represent a very ancient form of the mythical entity which later evolved to become the great horned serpent underwater panther of the historic Native American tribes, albeit from a time before the archetype was associated with the above word animal elements, such as wings. So here we have a picture of the Turner Earthworks in Little Miami Valley. Once held a complex of fire chambers and was lost to gravel pits in the 20th century. Serpent symbolism in Hopewell burial mounds. Basic serpent symbolism has been found at other Ohio Hopewell sites. As an example, a group of four sandstone tablets from Mound 1 of the Hopewell Mound Group in Ross County are engraved with effigies of a diamondback rattlesnake. The body formed a Z shape. Beyond Ohio, I had to cough. Beyond Ohio, serpent symbolisms, very similar to that documented from Ohio Valley Adena sites, has been found in Hopewell burial mounds in Illinois. The Utica Mound group consists of three groups of 27 mounds located on the Illinois River south of Utica, Illinois. Beneath Mound 1 of the Group 1, an effigy comprised of hundreds of stones was uncovered about 20 inches above the mound base, described as a large quantity of rock, which appears to be a large effigy of a snake. The stone serpent measured 25 by 17 feet, enclosed a central burial area originally containing at least 14 burials. And here we have one of the effigies, which is a rattlesnake tablet found at Hopewell's site. It possessed plumes carved into the sandstone near the head that probably represented feathers. It's beautiful. And and I did a live stream talking about the Denisovans, which were the pre-hominid species and how advanced they were. uh, creating very, geometrically designed jewelry, very advanced and beautiful stuff. So, this whole notion that these ancient civilizations were not technologically savvy or intelligent is ignorant and being foolish. But this is it adds to, in my opinion, it adds credence to the idea that, we really are, dealing with advanced civilizations, some of them extinct and possibly some of them may still be around. Snake skeletons. In Mound 3 of Group 1 at Utica, the bones of a snake were found placed over the frontal bones of two uh, dis, uh, disarticulated skeletons. In Mound 11 of the same group, two skeletons extended side by side, burials 10 and 11, also featured a snake skeleton placed over the frontal bones. Finally, a snake skeleton had been placed near the right shoulder of the skeleton of a young female in Mound 1 of Group 2. The stone serpent effigy and the snake skeletons placed with the burials at Utica mounds are strongly reminiscent of the Adena practices discussed in this article. Similar discoveries were also made at the Adler group of 8 Hopewell mounds near Joliet and the Des Plaines River in Will County, Illinois. Beneath Adler Mound 3, a central subfloor tomb containing the remains of 5 individuals placed shoulder to shoulder, as well as the skeletons of 2 infants, was uncovered. According to Howard Winters, with the exception of the 2 infants and the lower portion of the tomb, all burials were found with articulated vertebrae of snakes placed several centimeters above their wrist. In Alder Mound 7, Winters wrote in 1961, in Alder Mound 7, a tomb was found containing the remains of 4 individuals. Above the waist of one of the burials were found snake vertebrae, again intentionally placed in that position. Finally, Adler Mound 8 covered a subfloor tomb containing 3 extended burials and 1 large bundle reburial. Only the skeleton of a young adult male was associated with the grave goods. Regarding this burial, Winters notes the vertebrae of the bull snake were draped across and above the waist, as in Mound 3 and 7. The Great Serpent of Southern Ontario. The local manifestation of the Hopewell culture in southern Ontario, Quebec, and New York State is usually referred to as Point Peninsula. People participating in the Hopewell Point Peninsula culture constructed a serpent mound of their own at Roach Point in Rice Lake in Peterborough County, Ontario. The middle woodland component of the site consists of 9 burial mounds, of which Mound E is considered by many to be a serpent effigy. And here we have a picture of Serpent Mound of Rice Lake. The Mound E serpent is 194 feet in length and 25 feet wide at the base, with a maximum height of 5 to 6 feet. Mound F is located very near the head of the serpent and has been interpreted as an egg, similar to that before the head of the Great Serpent Mound in Ohio. The Mound F egg contained at least 6 burials. One of each was a trophy skull. Burial is found at many Adena and Hopewell sites in Ohio. David Boyle found the Mound F also contained a layer of earth mixed with ash and mussel shells, 4 feet from the surface at Mound Center, and beneath this, at the mound floor, was a stone circle 3 feet in diameter, which exhibited evidence of fire. These features are very similar to those documented by Squire and Davis within the Ulver Egg at the mouth of the Great Serpent Mound in Ohio. The ground within, quote, the ground within the oval is slightly elevated. A small circular elevation of large stones much burned once existed in its center, but they have been thrown down and scattered by some ignorant visitor, under the prevailing impression, probably that gold was hidden beneath them. End quote. The Rice Lake Serpent was also a burial mound and may have once contained the remains of at least 60 individuals. The burials were likely accidental and spanned several areas, but the oldest were those placed in burial pits beneath the mound and on the mound floor, with such artifacts as copper, shell, and silver beads, mandibles of timber, wolf, bird, and bear, beak of loon, a limestone animal effigy, and a massive double-binned adze. While these burials may seem to strongly differentiate the Rice Lake serpent from the Ohio counterpart, this is not the case, for the Ohio Valley archaeologists largely continue to insist that the Great Serpent Mound in Adams County was not a burial mound. Recent research by Jeffrey Wilson has proven that although they were forgotten and poorly documented, burials were recovered from the Ohio serpent sometimes in the late 1800s. With regard to the cultural influence and affiliations of the Rice Lake serpent, Michael Spence and J. Russell Harper state, mound burial might be a Hopewellian trait, though the serpent shape is possibly related to the serpent mound of Ohio, seemingly Adena. Spencer and Harper, 1968. Indeed, radiocarbon dates for the mound E serpent span 128 to 302 AD, overlapping the temporal range of late Adena and Hopewell in the Ohio Valley and elsewhere. The Rice Lake serpent is located in the vicinity of numerous burial mounds which have yielded extensive evidence of Hopewell influence. Regional connections and conclusions. The purpose of this article is to demonstrate the serpent symbolism of several Adena and Hopewell sites. The author suggests that in light of this evidence, there is no reason why the Great Serpent Mound in Adams County, Ohio, located near the epicenter of Adena and Hopewell, could not be considered as possibly being a site of one or the other, if not both of these cultures. This is especially true in light of much of the evidence, including earlier radiocarbon dates collected by William Rōnin as his associates in recent years. One objection to this article will undoubtedly be that the sites mentioned are from Kentucky, Illinois, West Virginia, the East Coast, and southern Ontario, while the Great Serpent Mound is located in southern Ohio. However, we would point out that the archaeological record strongly suggests close cultural connections between the Ohio Valley Adena and Hopewell, and the manifestations beyond. Furthermore, and perhaps most importantly, the recent evidence obtained from DNA research, 26, and studies of physical skeletal morphology, 27, clearly reveal that actual people spread out from the Ohio Valley during the time of the Adena and Hopewell, likely taking new ideas and forms of ritualisms with them. One of these ideas may well have been ceremonialism and veneration of an early form of great serpent as represented at Ohio's Great Serpent Mound. Now, to me, this the heavy the heavy notion of the serpent. Excuse me. It's a lot of talking. Needed to wet my whistle. It's really telling. Many, whether it's in South America, here in the Middle East, there's so much symbolism with the serpent. Now, if you've ever seen Bright Insight, Jimmy Corsetti, he does a lot of incredible videos, a lot of great research and work, and he has talked about, at one point there being a worldwide civilization, and these mounds in North America, a lot of them, not all of them, but I should say some of them are shaped like pyramids. And coincidentally, there is a pyramid in Alaska, and I believe there's several in Florida. So, you know, you have these earlier civilizations who, either they are occupying areas that were previously occupied by more advanced civilization, which we have seen be the case everywhere, whether it's in Egypt, South America, Central America. And you have these Hopewell and Adena cultures that were either emulating those past civilizations, or maybe they had descendants that were living within these the Adena and Hopewell cultures and were passing on that kind of knowledge and ritualistic practices. This is just me speculating, but it's fascinating to me that there may have been this idea of giants coexisting with normal sized humans. And there are stories of giants eating humans and things like that, and that's also an entirely possibility. um we it would be foolish to not acknowledge those stories that have been told in regards to giants hunting humans. And perhaps at one point there was that idea. But all I'm saying here is that there seems to be some cohabitation between various types of extinct humanoid races, whether they are the elongated giants or the normal size elongated humans. There is definitely some cases to be made and things to be considered. I mean, you um, uh, look at Göbekli Tepe over in Turkey. Some of the carvings on the astrological calendar are animals from different parts of the world. So these are things to kind of take into consideration. And even when I look at the design of that snake effigy, it was very reminiscent of various designs of effigies and just pottery and paintings in Central and South America. And like I was saying earlier, in regards to how some of these giants were buried sitting up, there are similar burials of elongated skulls, both with red hair, just like the giants in North America, sitting up in their burials as well. So I just think there's something there to be said. Uh, for everyone who's listening right now, I see we got some Rumble listeners. Much love to the Rumblers. I really appreciate you guys stopping by. Please hit that like button. Let's get this stream bustling and brewing. And please leave a comment with any thoughts. Let me know what you're thinking right now, how you feel about these giants and some of this data and evidence that I'm presenting to you. What are your thoughts? What are your feelings? But let's get back into it. Alrighty. Now we were right here, and we were gonna be, yeah, we covered Kentucky, and here we have a picture of a representation of a North American giant, and like I was saying before, the elongated skull. We have it here with the North American giant as well. And I'm not saying that for my listeners and everyone out there who's listening, much love to you guys. I'm not saying you got to believe all of this. I'm not saying you got to take it at face value. But my whole thing is, and this is how I kind of look at stuff, is you look at the consistencies in the data. And I've have several live streams that you could look back at that have consistent data that support everything that's being mentioned in these articles as well. So just keep an open mind. All right. Joe Davis County, Illinois. The mounds of the bluff have nearly all been opened within the last 2 or 3 years. In all that have been opened, the excavators have found in the center a pit that was evidently dug about 2.5 feet above the original surface of the ground. The bones in the pit indicate a race of gigantic stature, buried in a sitting posture around the sides of the pit, with legs extending toward the center. Interesting. Near the original surface, 10 or 12 feet from the center of the mound on the lower side, lying at full length upon its back, was one of the largest skeletons discovered by the Bureau agents. The length, as provided by actual measurements, being 7 and 8 feet, it was all clearly traceable. This quote was from the 12th annual report of the Bureau of Anthology. Now, I wanted to jump over and let's discuss this whole notion of a giant former race. And this article was written August 7th, again by Jason and Sarah. Titans under the earth. Evidence for the tall ones and the mounds of Pennsylvania. This article is dedicated to the memory of John William Dillon, who kept truth and dreams alive. All right, well, shout out to John. Now, if you're noticing, I mean, these mounds, they're everywhere, from West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Mississippi, even in Florida. But in Florida, they're more like pyramids over there. I digress. During the early woodland period, 1000 to 200 BC, the Adena people constructed extensive burial mounds and earthworks throughout the Ohio Valley in Ohio, Indiana, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, and West Virginia. Check out my live stream where I discuss the giants of West Virginia and the burials of those two particular giants and some of the interesting techniques. All right. Many of the skeletal remains found in these mounds by early antiquarians and 20th century archaeologists were of powerfully built individuals reaching between and 8 feet height. It is a record of these remains which has given the rise to the subject of ancient giants in the Ohio Valley. Now here we have a picture of Criel Mound. Destruction of evidence. Now remember I said earlier in the stream about the Smithsonian and how it's an extension of the federal government and how they have contingency plans enacted for any discoveries of giant remains or artifacts. While doing research for a book on this subject over the last several years, the authors were struck by how little of the archaeology of some regions is freely accessible and available to the public. One of those areas is the state of Pennsylvania, where the Carnegie Museum destroyed countless burial mounds without filling comprehensive reports in the late 1800s and early 1900s. Many of the mounds were wrecked by the Carnegie are only known to the public from old press reports, such as the following published in The Sun of December 8th, 1893. Quote, this mound, which was originally about 100 feet long and more than 12 feet high, has been somewhat worn down by time. It is on the J.R. Sincrest farm in South Huntington Township. The most interesting feature in the recent excavation was the mummified torso of a human body, portions of the bones dug up, and the bones of the legs. Professor Preston declares are those of a person between 8 and 9 feet in height. End quote. Now, the Smithsonian, that was their MO. Their whole goal, essentially, the Smithsonian's whole goal was to essentially rewrite American history for the mainstream narrative. for domestication of the American people and the eradication of the original people that prolific North America. That is what the Smithsonian's goal is. That's their intention, is to destroy evidence. They have done it countless times. They have been called out on it. They have had to apologize for it, but they will still continue to do that. There's a reason why a lot of these mounds and are, are not allowed to be excavated or they're destroyed because the artifacts within them would completely contradict and destroy the mainstream narrative of American or North American history. So that's why they would go out of their way and destroy these things. And that's why it's funny that you'll find articles, you can look them up from the early 1800s, mid 1800s, early 19th century, talking about um, um, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Talking about giant bones being recovered on all these various farms, talking about the local colleges coming in or the Smithsonian coming in, and bada bing, bada boom, everything is suppressed, disappeared, or destroyed. And that's pretty much their MO. And that's why it's increasingly frustrating for individuals like myself when we hear things like that or what happened in the Middle East during ISIS's reign, where they were just destroying countless archaeological sites and history. And many of it, in my opinion, is by design, to not allow us as individuals, as humans, to know the truth, to really uncover our history. But I digress. Enough of the Rōnin rant. Let's get back into it. Here we have a picture of the Miamiburg Mound. Large skeletal remains. In order to add some clarity to the subjects of the mound builders and large skeletal remains from Pennsylvania, the authors reviewed a considerable amount of archaeological literature from the state and incorporated the information into several chapters of Ages of the Giants, a cultural history of the tall ones in prehistoric America, written in 2017. Perhaps the most famous instance of press reports describing a large skeleton from a Pennsylvania mound is a case from the Union Township in Washington County, Pennsylvania. In 1932, archaeologist George Fisher excavated the mound after he was informed that amateurs were engaged in heavy looting at the site. This situation attracted hundreds of spectators, and Fisher's work became a subject of daily discussion by the local media. One discovery in particular was regularly reported at this time. Quote, one of the most interesting reports that will go into the archives is that on the body of a giant 7 feet 5 inches tall, this titan was found on the fifth level of a clay mound where the bodies were sandwiched between 11 layers of sandstone. The majority of the adults measured between 5 feet 10 inches and 6 feet 3 inches in stature. The Daily Republican, 9/15/1932. Quote, one of the skeletons of these mighty men is 7 feet 5 inches in length, and even the remains of the woman and children show them to have been of tremendous stature. Heavy, primitive faces must have topped their mammoth bodies, Fisher says, for all the skulls are heavy boned, with massive jaws and strong teeth that could rip meat into shreds. The Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, 1914, I mean, 9/14/1932. Now, there was one article that I read where they measured the jaw of this skull and they said that it was large enough to bite into a coconut. Now, imagine witnessing a 7 foot tall person bite into a coconut. Yeah, take that show on the road and make some serious cash. All right, so here we have a human effigy pipe created by the prehistoric Adena culture, which lived in the Ohio Valley between 800 BC and 100 AD. Mystery of the mounds. Over the last decade, these types of press reports have caused several researchers to seek out more information on the mound excavated by Fisher, but until now it has remained largely a mystery. The authors found that the site is known in the archaeological literature as the Pollux Hailstone Mound. There is some debate over the age and cultural affiliations of the mound. Archaeologist and Adena expert Don W. Drago considered the Pollux Hill claim to belong to an Adena stone mound sub tradition. In more modern times, archaeologists have reevaluated some of the mounds that Drago included in his cultural taxon and have suggested that they could actually date to the late Woodlands times, several hundred years after the age of Adena. One reason for difficulty in finding professionally documented information on the Pollux Hill crane is the fact that Fisher himself did not publish the official report. Instead, Donald Cazzo published a report in 1933 using information taken directly from Fisher's field notes. And if I remember correctly, Fisher didn't release the information. I may be confusing it with someone else. I might be. But if I'm correct, he didn't originally release it because he knew this would cause him some issues down the line. So he didn't release it. I might be getting it mixed with the West Virginia giant. I think I might be getting it mixed with that one. In that situation, the original guy, he didn't release it until 10 years later. And he didn't do it because he was apprehensive about the kind of blowback he might get because he was aware of what was going on with the Smithsonian and aware of other things as well. I don't want to spoil too much. I highly recommend you go and check out that live stream after this if you are so inclined. According to Cazzo's document, Fisher unearthed an extended adult skeleton covered with packed mud and rocks in northwestern portion of the mound, which is numbered burial 39 in the field notes. Regarding this burial, Cancel report states, as the bones were in poor condition, it was impossible to obtain exact measurements. Their size, however, indicated a very large, heavy person, much larger than the other burials in the mound. Okay. Following the excavations, the bones of over 40 skeletons from Pollux Hill were transported to the Museum of Harrisburg and then to the Smithsonian Institution in Washington. On October 12, 1932, the Pittsburgh Press reported that Donald Kazov himself was the person in charge of transporting the skeletons from Fineville to the museum, noting one skeleton making the trip with Kazo to the Capitol is a giant 7 feet 5 inches in height. The information in the article came from an interview with Kazo, who took the opportunity to condemn the Carnegie Museum's handling of the Pennsylvania prehistory. Um, and I would speculate that he was probably frustrated with them giving it to the Smithsonian rather than keeping it in Pennsylvania at that museum, since it's Pennsylvania history. And that's another thing with the Smithsonian. They'll take local history and then they'll destroy it, squash it, hide it away. They had to return some of the stuff they took from uh, uh, indigenous burial sites, they had to return it. And some of it was giant bones. However, because it was on, on indigenous territory, and it was, religious burial sites, they weren't going to allow people to take any samples. So we won't really get any information regarding those particular sites. I don't remember them off the top of my head, so I apologize. Artifacts on record from the Pollux Hill claim include two rolled copper tubular beads, bone hairpins, and steamed and tangled points. Celts, one stone mortar, and a perforated bare canine teeth. Okay. So here we have several gorget ornaments, always two holes at the Creek Mound Museum. Field notes from the important site. Large skeletal remains were also recovered from the McKee's Round Rocks Mound, which once overlooked the confluence of the Ohio River and Carty's Creek at Stile Township in Allegany County, Pennsylvania. Frank Giordetti excavated the McKee's Rocks Mound on behalf of the Carnegie Museum in 1896. Unfortunately, several controversies led to Gordet's resignation from the Carnegie and a permanent retreat from archaeology before a complete report was filed for the excavations. In Ages of the Giants, we utilized Gordetti's field notes as well as the research of 5 different archaeologists who reviewed the field notes, artifacts, and bones from the mound to recreate the discoveries at this important site. Relevant sources for the information provided here, as well as much more info on the site, can be found in the book. So the McKee's Rock Mound was 16 or 7 feet in height at the time of excavation and 85 feet in diameter. There were over 30 burials in the mound of the extended, cremated and bone bundled human remains, many of which were found in stone cist tombs. The mound was built up in 3 construction phases, each of which took an unknown length of time to complete. These phases spanned the time of Adena to the end of the Middle Woodland period. The oldest or primary phase of the mound was a 3.5 feet high tumulus made of river sand and clay, which covered the skeleton of Adena female 6 foot 2 inches in length. Artifacts with this burial include adze, 4 deer or elk scalpel awls, a copper scythe for an imitation bear canine, 357 columnella shell beads, 153 margella shell beads, antler and bone flaking tools, and one slate of real sharp gorget. And here we have a picture of a sketch of the enlarged Adena mound. We have some skeletons built into the mound, and then some within the mound. And then you have one all the way at the bottom. Speculate that one was probably the important person. Burial 20 was a female in sandstone cist tomb. Referring to this burial, Frank Gordetti's field notes mention the person could not have been less than 6 foot 6 inches in height. The skull of this burial had been crushed down into the breastbones, and the bones of the feet were missing. According to the historian George Thornton Fleming, who carefully documented the excavations, the remains would have measured 7 feet in height, with the feet and neck intact. There were several other skeletons from McKee's Rocks, which measured between 6 feet and 2 inches and 6 feet and 4 inches in length. Squawky Hill, curious burial mound. In northwestern Pennsylvania, many burial mounds have been attributed to the Hopewell influence tradition, which some archaeologists have referred to as the Squawky Hill culture. Squawky Hill mounds are also found in northeastern Ohio, the upper Ohio Valley in West Virginia, and New York State. These mounds date to the Middle Woodland period, usually between 100 and 500 AD. Squawky Hill sites in Pennsylvania include the Sugar Run, the Cordon, Irwin, and Corn Planter Mound groups. At the Corn Planter Ruin site in Warren County, Edmund Carpenter investigated two surviving mounds in 1941. He found the mounds to contain circular stone vaults composed of stone slabs, also featuring stone roofing. The tombs were all empty, but one still contained a blade, red orchard, and calcined bone. According to Carpenter's report, a local artifact collector named Dudley A. Martin had looted the tombs prior to his investigations. Unfortunately, Martin himself had gone public with his findings, and January 27th, 1937, issue the Altoona Tribune. Quote, Dudley A. Martin, octarian and collector of Indian relics, stated that he was present at the opening of some curious burial mounds in the Corn Planter Indian Reservation in Warren County nearly 50 years ago. These barrels were walled up inside and had outlets to the air, so much so that in opening one mound it was found to be full of rattlesnakes. In one mound there was found the skeleton of a chief, 7 feet tall, wearing much barbaric adornment and jewelry. End quote. There are many similar accounts from burial mounds featuring traits similar to the corn planter mounds along the Pennsylvania and New York State border region. Quote, just over the line in Genesee Township, a mound about 14 feet in diameter, walled up by a stone cairn. Cairn. What is that? Cairn? Cane? Cairn? I am not sure what that word is. About 3 or 4 feet high. Some curious persons dug into the side of the mound and brought to light the skeletal of a man of gigantic size, also the bones of a dog, nearly all of the bones crumbling upon exposure to air. With the bones were found numerous flint arrowheads and some stone ornaments, and about a pint of small shells, which also soon disintegrated upon exposure. In December 1886, W.H. Scoville of Anderson Settlement discovered a mound at Ellisburg. On exploring it were found parts of a skeletal of a man measuring between 7 and 8 feet. End quote. These were both experts taken from Michael A. Leeson, History of Counties of McKean, Elk Cameron Porter, Pennsylvania, by J.H. Bears and Company, 1860. Here, quote, this mound was opened by vandals about 25 years ago, and entire skeletons in good state of preservation were tossed aside or carried off by schoolboys. Many of the remains were found near the surface, covered by broad flagstones, while others were found at the considerable depth. Great quantities of arrowheads, discoloids, stone axes, and beads of various kinds were discovered with the bones. Some of the skeletons were of such large proportions as to indicate that the people who lived in the days when the mounds were built were a race of giants. Pittsburgh Daily Post, October 7th, 1895. Now, you know how I said that I'm all about consistencies and consistencies in that data. And this is consistencies in that data. Archaeological research conducted in recent years indicates that the cultural history of western Pennsylvania, including the Adena, Hopewell, and late woodland mounds, is in need of revision. Perhaps as these new investigations progress, more information on obscure and little-known sites will become available. As I was saying, I'm all about the consistencies, and there's clearly consistencies in this data. and in this information, and in these, archaeologists who have, excavated these sites. Okay. Now we're gonna jump over to another one because I want to keep going with, providing you guys, uh, data on um, these archaeological discoveries of these bones. So let's keep on going because, like I was saying, you need enough information and data so that you yourselves as individuals, while listening, can know that I'm not, I'm not talking out my ass. Because as you can tell, it smells rather nice and pleasant in this live stream at the moment. But I genuinely hope that you guys are enjoying the live stream and that you're enjoying the content. I see we got a decent amount of people over in the Rumble stream. Much love to you guys over in Rumble. I really appreciate you guys taking time out of your day to enjoy this little ride with me. Please hit the like button. Let's get this stream on the front page of Rumble. And leave some comments. Please let me know what your thoughts are. Okay, now let's pop up the article. All right, gigantic strong. Okay, so we did cover. Yeah, we covered that one. Did we cover this one? Let me check. No. Okay, here we go. We are on track. Perfect. All right. Now this article was updated November 25th, 2017, and it's written by Hugh Newman. The giants of ancient Albion and the legendary founding of prehistoric Britain. All right, we going international with our giants. Okay, the giants are the heart of national folklore concerning the founding of Britain, and archaic traditions state they have inhabited the county since deep antiquity. This article investigates not only the origins of Britain, it also uncovers a lost legacy of extremely tall and powerful individuals who once ruled this part of the world. Prehistoric giant king. And here we have a old painting of Merlin being assisted by a giant at Stonehenge. And it was illustrated 1150 AD. The earliest traditions agree that the first inhabitants of Britain were all the tall persuasions. Some say they were descendants of Noah's son Ham and came from Africa about 4,000 years ago. I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to get into that topic right now. But if you want to know about the origins of the white people, uh, and the origins of Europe, essentially, I highly recommend you check out my two-parter of the dynastic race. Because I'll be honest with you, like I said earlier in this live stream, for those who are just joining, there, to quote a Star Wars character, there is a bit of truth in legends, whether it's biblical or hearsay or passed down. And there's definitely some very interesting evidence regarding Noah and his children, particularly Joseph. So if you're interested in biblical narratives and you're interested in learning some of the origins of the various post-dynastic races, not pre-dynastic, but post-dynastic, I highly recommend you check out my two-parter. It's really good, but I digress. Britain's oldest acknowledged name is thought to be taken from a prehistoric giant king called Albion, who made his way to the island after being banished from his homeland in Greece. He was begotten by the sea god whom the Greeks called Poseidon. The Romans Neptune. In Chronicles of England, Scotland, and Ireland by Raphael Holinshed, Albion and the Giants were said to have gradually consolidated their position in Britain, ruling the land for hundreds or possibly thousands of years. Albion versus Hercules. After a long reign, Albion went to the south of France, called Gaul at the time, to help his army defeat Hercules. To ensure winning, Hercules summoned his father Zeus, and a shower of stones fell from the sky. These were used as weapons against Albion, and he was defeated. However, the giant race of Britain continued for hundreds more years. Although their numbers decreased and ended up at the southwestern tip of Cornwall until the arrival of Brutus after the Trojan Wars. However, Britain's original name could also be from a Greek giantess called Albina. Quote, The Chronicles of Britain, written by John D. Wervin between 1445 and 1455, relate that in the time of Jahir, the third judge of Israel after Joshua, Lady Albine and her sisters came to and settled in an island which they named Albion after her, and which afterwards got the name of Britain. While they were living there, the devil assumed the shape of a man and dwelt among the wicked women, and by they used issue great and terrible giants of giantness, who afterwards much increased and multiplied and occupied the land for a long time, namely until the arrival of Brutus, who conquered them. And here we have a picture, or an illustration, I should say, of Lady Albina and other daughters of Diodicus, Dionysius. Two giants of Albion are in the background, encountered by a ship carrying Brutus and his men. This was by French Prose Brut, British Library Royal 19, 1450 to 1475. The story of Albina has variations. One version says she was taller than average, so had giant genes. Her father, Diocletian, was either a Roman emperor or possibly the king of Syria. Most versions agree that her father had 33 wicked daughters. Notice the number, 33. We're getting into some Mason territory here, ladies and gents. But he managed to find 33 husbands to curb their unruly ways. Oh boy. The daughters were displeased, and under the leadership of their eldest sister, Alba, also Albina or Albane, they plotted to cut the throats of their husbands as they slept. Oh, that's very modern day. Quote, For this crime they were set adrift in a boat with half a year rations. And after a long and dreadful journey, they arrived at a great island that came to be named Albion. After the eldest, here they stayed. With the assistance of demons, they populated the wild, windswept islands of a race of giants. That's fascinating. Have any of you guys heard of this story in regards to Britain? I've never heard this story. I mean, I've heard, them talk about giants in regards to uh Britain, but I've never heard this story before. It's fascinating to me. All right, assistants really meant mated with, and their offspring, a new ruling giant elite, were founded. These giants were evidenced in the story by huge bones that were said to be unearthed in the country during the 1400s. This echoes the story of Grigori, or Watchers of the Bible, which mated with human women and birthed the mighty Nephilim giants, who have remarkably similar traits to their British counterparts. So, now you got multiple different ancient stories and religious sects coinciding into one, um, and occult stuff as well. So this is very, very interesting. History of the Kings of Britain. Geoffrey of Monmouth's influential 12th century Historia Regum Britannia, History of the Kings of Britain, has caused one of the biggest controversies regarding the founding of Britain. Thousands of years after the giants had populated the island, Brutus and other warriors fleeing the Trojan Wars landed on the coast of Albion, and legend states that the modern name of Britain comes from Brutus. Geoffrey asserts that he translated the Historia into Latin in about 1136 from a very ancient book in the British tongue that was loaned to him by Walter Arcadian of Oxford. What this book was has had scholars debating for centuries, but it could have been the Historia Britannium, History of the Britons, from the 9th century, written by Ninus, a monk from Bangor, Wales. This is likely as he covered many Arthurian myths, including the giants of ancient Albion. An important section of Geoffrey's text has Brutus as his men realizing that Albion has already partly populated by unexpected tall foes. It was inhabited except for a few giants. They drove the giants whom they discovered into the caves in the mountains. After scaring off and launching attacks on the Titans, after scaring off the giants and launching attacks on the Titans, the land was divided up, and Koios was given the southwest area of Cornwall to rule, named after the great warrior. Cornelius experienced great pleasure from wrestling with the giants. Oh, I bet he did. Of whom there were far more than they in any of the districts which had been distributed among his comrades. Among the others was a particularly repulsive one called Gog Magog, who was 12 feet tall. End quote. Attack of the Giants. Other chronicles state that he was in fact 12 cubits tall, so this would have made him 18 feet tall. Gog Magog was described as being so strong that he could uproot an oak tree and shake it like a hazel wand. Anyway, the ferocious giant attacked Cornelius' camp with 20 of his kin. This turned into an all-out battle, and Cornelius and his men called on their local allies and eventually defeated them in bloody conflict. Brutus chose to keep one of the giants alive as he wanted to witness a wrestling match between Gogmagog and Cornelius. During the tightly fought match, Gogmagog broke 3 of Cornelius's ribs, and he was so enraged he hoisted Gogmagog up on his shoulders with superhuman strength and ran off the cliff where he threw him to his death. Damn. His body was smashed into many pieces after hitting sharp rocks and stained the water red. That was so discolored with his blood as to continue tinged with it for a long time. The cliff from which he was thrown became known as Lagnagog, or the Giant's Leap. It was on the Plymouth Hoe that became the legendary place that the wrestling occurred because it was recorded in 1486 that a giant turf-cut figure was carved depicting 2 figures, one of them being Gogmagog. I love that name. So here we have a artist's impression of what the Chalk Hill figures of Plymouth Hoe may have looked like. Gog Magog. I am Gog Magog. Wherever it was, the names of Gog and Magog first appear in the Hebrew Bible with reference to Magog, son of Joseph. What was I saying about Joseph? In the book of Genesis, Then Gog, the king of Magog, appears in the Old Testament in Ezekiel 38:2 as the instigator of a terrible battle. Gog was referred to as being a person, and Magog was the land he was from. Similar stories are echoed in the book of Revelation and the Quran. There are giants in the Quran? Okay, alrighty. I didn't know that. The tradition is sparse and confused as Gog and Magog are presented as men, supernatural beings, giants and demons, national groups or lands, and appear widely in other folklore and mythology. For example, Gog Magog and Gog Magot are identified with giants in Spenser's Faerie Queene, 1590, and in the medieval legends of Alexander. The names even reached Cambridge in eastern England, where the hilly area became known as the Grog Magog Hills, where interestingly some taller than average skeletons were unearthed in the 1800s. After defeating the giants, Brutus traveled all over the country to find a suitable spot to rule from. He decided on the river Thames and founded the city of Troia Nova, or New Troy, which became Trinovantum, we now know as London, which his captured giant in tow. Another later version of the story describes how the giants Cog and Magog were two people and were taken prisoners and forced to become porters at the royal palace, now the London Guildhall. The effigies of Gog and Magog have remained at the Guildhall since the reign of Henry VIII. In the Gigastic history of the two famous giants of Guildhall, 1741, it proclaims that Gog Magog and Cornelius were in fact two giants. Quote, Cornelius and Gog Magog were two brave giants who richly valued their honor and extended their whole strength and force in defense of their liberty and country. So the city of London, by placing these, their representatives in their Guildhall, emphatically declare that they will, like mighty giants, defend the honor of their country and liberties of this their city, which excels all others, as much as those huge giants exceed in stature the common bulk of mankind. End quote. So here we have the effigies of Gog and Magog being paraded through London and the Lord's Mayor show every November. Oh man, wish I could go. The defeat of Krog Magog by Cornelius was the beginning of the end of the remaining giants. And the few that remained turned up again the tales of Jack the Giant Killer and Cormoran, mainly based in Cornwall, while others were said to have fled to Dartmoor and the mountains of Wales. Jack the Giant Killer. Before we leave the confines of Cornwall, the stories of Jack the Giant Killer are worthy of mention. The violent chronicles of Britain's most famous giant hunter stretch far back into prehistory, to the times when the giants and humans were attempting to coexist, before the arrival of Brutus. Mainly based in Cornwall, his exploits lingered across the whole of Britain. He was presented as a clever young man who often outwitted his gargantuan foes. The most famous story is that he defeated the terrible Cormoran at the St. Michael's Mount. By blowing a horn loudly, he caused the giant to come rushing out, but it fell into a deep pit that Jack had prepared and covered with twigs. Cormoran was then hacked to death by Jack. The other stories, damn, goddamn. The other stories continue in this vein, and it is only when the printing press was developed in the Victorian age that the story was toned down and it transformed into the children's classic Jack and the Beanstalk. Ah, okay. Even though there are thousands of legends of giants throughout Britain, there are a surprising amount of accounts of large and powerful people in the archaeological and historical record. Their physical strength and stature became exaggerated as their deeds passed into legend, but in a strange twist, it is often in the same locations that actual giant skeletons and bones were reportedly unearthed. Here are a few intriguing examples. And here we have St. Michael's Mount photographed in 1903 with added color. Wow. Cornwall. At St. Michael's Mount, a prehistoric 8-foot skeleton was unearthed from a dungeon on the island 250 years ago. That may well be the giant that Jack was said to have slayed. Quote, Trigamy. The annual register of 1761 tells us that in March of that year, as a miner was working at Tregony in Cornwall, in a new mine, he accidentally discovered a stone coffin in which were some inscribed characters. Within it was a skeleton of a man of gigantic size, which on the admission of the air melted into dust. One tooth, 2 inches and a half long, and thick in proportion, remained whole. The length of the coffin was 11 feet 3 inches, and its depth was 3 feet 9 inches. So here we have a news report from the Age, January 24th, 1955. The killer, St. Michael's Mount in Cornwall, the island which Jack the Giant Killer wrested from an oversized man named Cormoran, has been given to the British National Trust to be preserved as an historical site and tourist attraction. There may be more truth and history than fiction in the old nursery tale. The evidence, some 200 years ago, the skeleton of a man who in life stood 8 feet tall, was found in a narrow dungeon cut in the solid rock of the island. To this day, the visitors can see, beside the step-carved path leading up to the castle, the pit where Jack trapped his foe. So, Denvershire. This is an area where Gog Magog was thrown off the cliff by Koios. A stone coffin in the Denvershire contained a thigh bone belonging to a man 8 feet 9 inches high. Wales. Mold Flintshire. Quote, he found by the remains of Thornhill that the person entered was above the common size of man. End quote. Whoa. And here we have the mold cap made of gold now on display in the British Museum. That's massive. It's the mold cape. It's a cape. It's a gold cape. A golden cape. Massive. Absolutely massive. If anyone saw something, like, I mean, if you look at the size of this thing, I mean, like, that's massive. I mean, to put that over your shoulders, like, and think about the weight of that. How heavy. That's pure gold. Man, that's wild. Oh man, that's crazy. Well, I want to say thank you to the new subscriber over on Rumble. I really appreciate it. I see we got 10 over there on Rumble watching. Please hit that like button, would be greatly appreciated. Thank you for taking some time out of your day to join me on this journey. And if you have any, comments, criticisms, please leave a comment. Let me know what you think about this information and how are you feeling about this stuff. All right, now Stonehenge. I'm sorry, but this cape is massive. That's really incredible. Stonehenge. Later in histories, giants reappear in the stories of Welsh wizard Merlin. He tells the king that in a distant epoch, giants transported huge tritons from North Africa to Killarus in Ireland, where the giants' dance was positioned. Later, they were transported to Salisbury Plain by a mysterious means. However, huge skeletons have been discovered in the mounds in the local landscape. In Journey into South Wales, 1802, George Lipscomb reported a skeleton which measured 14 feet 10 inches in length. 14 feet. In a theological, biblical, and esoterical dictionary, 1830, it described a 9-foot 4-inch skeleton unearthed near Salisbury in 1719. It also recounts the mound named Giant's Grave next to St. Edmund's Church, just a few miles from Stonehenge. Wow. So, you here, like I said, I was going to present you more data, more evidence to the point that, these skeletal remains, these race of giants clearly existed. It's up to you whether or not you want to adhere to it or not. Gaul, France, where Albion was finally defeated in the battle with Hercules, are two examples of gigantic skeletons being unearthed. Okay, I cannot read that article at all. Okay, so this is from the New York Times. It was published October 3rd, 1892. And from what I can see from the London Globe, in the year 1890, some human bones of enormous size, double the ordinary, in fact, were found in the tumulus of Castillon and have been since carefully examined by Professor Keir, who, while admitting that the bones are those of very tall race, nevertheless made them abnormal in distinction and uh, and apparently of morbid growth. They undoubtedly reopen the question of the giants of antiquity, but do not uh, furnish succulent. I'm sorry, I can't get the last part. But he seems like they're saying that it's like it puts questions to the giants of antiquity, but does not like fully answer the question whether they exist or not. I think that's what he's saying. And then we have another one here. Find old grave skeletons of giant warriors unearthed in France. Men who lived 25,000 years ago, believed to have died fighting, uh, are fighting. Arrow found in head of one. Okay. The authors have collected over 150 accounts of giant bones, skeletons, and skulls throughout the British Isles. Although the founding of Britain is still shrouded in mystery, and Jeffrey's histories is clearly jumbled up versions of older books and myths, the stories of giants seem to go very far back. The legends and foundations of myths of Britain are so strongly associated with these local titans. We hope this introduction of giant lore gives some indication that they could be the ancestral memories of real life giants who ruled here long before us Brits ever lived here, and could have been responsible for the thousands of megalithic constructions that grace this ancient landscape. And here we have a picture of the Bird Castle giant skeleton in Norfolk, a Saxon giant who lived in 6th century AD and is 7 feet and 4 inches tall. So even here, they make the case of possibly that there was a advanced civilization of giants that essentially, you know, occupied the planet, may have built the pyramids. If that's something that you're curious about, I did a live stream covering the possibility of the pyramids being built by giants. If that's something that interests you and you're intrigued by, I highly recommend you check that out after this stream. But let's continue. Okay. Now we discussed a gigantic structure. of giants. So I wanted to make sure I gave you guys enough data and evidence that you guys can go from. So let's continue on the main article. We're gonna break off again in a bit. Um, yeah, okay, okay, we did that. Okay, here we go. All right, Kanawha Valley, West Virginia. Number 11 is now 35 by 40 feet in the base and 40 feet high. In the center, 3 feet above the surface, was a vault 8 feet long and 3 feet wide. In the bottom of this, among the decayed fragments of bark wrappings, lay a skeleton fully 7 feet long, extended at full length at the back head west, 19 feet from the top. In the remains of a bark coffin, a skeleton measuring 7.5 feet in length and 19 inches across the shoulders was discovered. The 12th annual report of the Bureau of Ethnology. Quote, within the village of Brownstone, 10 miles above Charleston and just below the mouth of Lenz Creek, is another such ancient burial ground. At Brownstone, not long since, two skeletons were found together. One a huge frame about 7 feet in length, and another about 4 feet, a dwarf and deformed. End quote. History of the Great Kanawha Valley. And here we have um, a map of an entire burial mound, a burial city. You see mounds in Dunbar of South Charleston recorded by the Bureau of American Ethnology in 1884. The red mounds are probably the Cryle Mound in South Charleston, the Flat Top Mound on the western edge of the Sunset Memorial Park, and the Poorhouse Mound on the Shawnee Park. For my podcast listeners, if that's something you're really interested in, jump over to the live stream if you want to see the maps. Okay. And, these sites, they're so bizarre. So they're just so absolutely bizarre. All right. More anomalous giant remains. Now, what I was saying about Florida. Okay, here we go. Florida. Pursuing my investigations and excavating further toward the southeast face of the mound, I came upon the largest stone axe I have ever seen or that I have ever been found in this section of the country. Close to it was the largest, most perfect cranium of the mound. Near by the side of this skull were the right femurs, the humerus, and part of the radius, with a portion of the pelvis directly under the skull. Anticipating a perfect specimen in this skull, I was doomed to disappointment. For, after taking it out of the earth and setting it up so that I could view the fleshless face of the gigantic savage, in the space of 2 hours it crumbled into pieces, except small portions. According to measurements of the bones of the skeleton, its height must have been quite 7 feet tall. End quote. Annual report of the Boards of Regents of the Smithsonian. What was I telling you about the Smithsonian? And here we have a digital sketch of an ancient Floridian giant. And what's interesting about this picture, this depiction, it looks very similar to those of South American indigenous people. The outfit, the hair. It's very interesting. Louisiana. Quote, In the same line of abnormality was the finding of one skull in which the detention reached the unusual number of 40 teeth. The increase consisting of eight additional incisors. The formation of the skull found in the lateral mound, as compared with those of other localities, is highly anomalous. The anomaly in these cases cannot be ascribed to artificial disfiguration, for were it such, the otherwise symmetrical development of the other parts would be impossible. Their remarkable conformation could not possibly have been the result of bandage or other external appliances, but was undoubtedly congenital. Publication, end quote. Publication of the Louisiana Historical Society. So it's like I was saying. I mean, there's so much data here. The whole idea of giants existing is essentially mainstream in many ways. It's just suppressed. Same with elongated skulls, what Brian Forster has been researching and dedicating a portion of his life to. Etowah Mound Group. Quote, Grave A stone sepulchre, 2.5 feet wide, 8 feet long, and 2 feet deep, was formatted by placing stitite slabs on edge at the sides and ends, and others across the top. The bottom consisted simply of earth hardened by fire. It contained the remains of a single skeleton lying on its back with the head east. The frame was heavy and 7 feet long. End quote. 12th Annual Report of the Bureau of Ethnology. And here we have a artist's conception of the Etowah site, a Mississippi culture archaeological site located on the banks of Etowah's River in Barton County, Georgia, built and occupied in three phases from 1000 to 1550 AD. Look, what does that look like to you? What do those look like? They look like pyramids. Look, look at the larger pyramids and look at all the smaller pyramids. And what was I saying? I told you, I told you from other people who have done the research and the data and it's right here in front of you. They look like pyramids. I ain't talking out my ass right now. As you can tell, it smells really good in this live stream. So here you have it. And they look like pyramids. And this whole notion and idea of a worldwide civilization that used pyramids is not out of the realm of possibility, considering the fact that you're looking at it right now. Look at the mounds. It's right there for you. Please, for those listening, for my Rumble people, please tell me, what are your thoughts on this? What are your feelings when you look at this photo and you see pyramids in Mississippi? What are your thoughts? I want to hear from you guys. Leave some, put something in the comment. Make sure you hit that like button and share this stream. But I want to know, what do you guys interpret of this? How does this make you feel? For me, I'm already kind of used to this, but it just reaffirms things that I have been personally feeling. But it's right there in front of you. There's no mistaking. As I like to put it, I'm an essential realist. I deal in the essential reality, and what you're looking at right now is the essential reality. Now um imagine if this area was still traversable. Imagine if this entire um uh city was still accessible. I mean, look at how incredibly gorgeous and beautiful it is. Look at the large structure in the middle. It's no different than in Mexico. I mean, they're pyramids. They're literally pyramids. I know they call them mounds, All right, they're calling them mounds. I personally think they call them mounds because I think the majority of people in North America, and I include, United States and Canada, I don't think they could wrap. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but I really don't think their brains could conceptualize the fact that North America at one point was littered with pyramids. They just weren't pyramids of stone; they were pyramids of dirt. Which is just, which is no, it's no different than looking at all the skyscrapers throughout the world. We all have skyscrapers, every continent. They're built generally the same, but they all go up. They all have a similar structure. They all have a similar design. I mean, you've seen, look at apartment complexes, whether in North America, whether in Europe, whether in South America, whether in Asia, they genuinely look the same. Most skyscrapers generally look the same. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that in Mexico and in South America, you'll have pyramids of stone. In China, you got pyramids of stone. I bet you guys didn't know about the pyramids in China, but spoiler alert, there are pyramids in China. They're made of stone. You have a pyramid in Greece, older than the one in Egypt. Bet you didn't know about that. But the point that I'm making here is that when you look at this picture, when you look at this and you look at these massive pyramids, I don't want to call them mounds. It don't make no sense calling them mounds. I know they're only called mounds because of dirt, but they're pyramids. Pyramids of dirt. I don't, what's the difference? It still looks like a pyramid. But I'm just saying, like this, further confirms that the previous occupants of North America were highly advanced, highly sophisticated, and highly impressive. But enough of a Rōnin rant. These examples represent the various anomalous features in the unique physical types, which were encountered in the 19th and 20th centuries. For my latecomers, unique physical types is the scientific term for giants. No different than UAPs, UFOs, Spatially and culturally, they illustrate the extensive temporal and geographical range of these types. The Kanawha Valley mound builders left their remains in an area where some of the oldest Fayette thick Adena pottery and diverse types of mound construction have been found. It has recently been suggested that sites in West Virginia may push the acceptable beginning of the early woodland period back to 1400 to 1300 BC. And that coincides with the Younger Dryas impact and Graham Hancock talking about the Denisovans. But these aren't the Denisovans. This is a completely different culture. The samples and keep in mind, I don't think the Denisovans weren't in North America. Maybe, I'm not sure. I can't remember off the top of my head at the moment. I apologize. The samples from Illinois came from a region where Archaic era mounds have been found, often with Hopewell mounds built over into hundreds of thousands of years later, as the case of the Elizabeth Mound 1 and Peter Clunk Mound 7. The Etowah Mound, Mound C, is ascribed to the Mississippian cult dated 950 to 450 AD. Okay, did I cover that? Let me see. Did I pull that up? Okay, so yeah, okay, we're definitely gonna take a quick peek at that. Um, yeah, let's take a quick peek at this Mississippian cult from 950 to 1450 AD. And this whole notion there was nothing going on in North America. Like, man, they were wilding out over in North America. All right, let me pull that up real quick. Thank you for your patience. Oh, wait, hold on. Yeah, before we jump over to the Mississippi cult, we're gonna look at the Hopewell Mounds. I don't want to get ahead of myself. Okay. All right, this was written just November 6th, 2017, again by Jason and Sarah. We've already uh, read several articles by them. Near Trenton in Dade County, Georgia, is a place called Tunakanahe, supposedly named after the Native American word meaning Lookout Creek. Located just a few hundred yards east of Lookout Creek is an archaeological site known as the Kunakahe Mound Group. The Tunakane site consists of four earthen mounds featuring an outer layer or a mantle of limestone. Located near the mounds are two prehistoric burial pits. In the winter of 1973, the Anai Society of Amateur Archaeologists of Tennessee and Georgia brought the site to attention of professional archaeologists following an incident during which Mound C was looted and six burials were destroyed. In fact, the site had been routinely vandalized for around 50 years by the time archaeologists arrived to perform excavations and research. At that point, the archaeologists realized the decades of vandalism had somehow spared the most important features of the site. That's incredible. What the professional diggers found was considered of extraordinary archaeological importance, for the Tutankhamun mounds turned out to be the work of people affiliated with the ancient Hopewell culture. Here we have the Hopewell Mounds of Mound City Group in Ohio. Elaborate earthworks and mounds. The Hopewell culture is usually considered a prehistoric manifestation of the Ohio River Valley, dating to between 200 BC and around 450 AD, spanning the entire Middle Woodland time period. Hopewell people in Ohio are famous among archaeological researchers for constructing incredibly elaborate earthwork centers and burial mounds, as well as helming an exchange system that reached the Gulf Coast of Canada. Wow. The tombs in the Hopewellian mounds in the Ohio River Valley, Illinois, Michigan, Wisconsin, Indiana, and Iowa have been found to contain exotic artifacts of mica, shell, copper, and silver. The heartland of the Hopewell culture is considered to be the Paint Creek Cedio Valley confluence in Ross County, Ohio, where it evolved from an earlier Adena culture. While the Midwestern and northern manifestations of Hopewell are widely known, the same cannot be said for the sites of the southern extension, such as Tunakanahe. The Tunakanahe mounds ended up producing what at the time represented the greatest variety and quantity of Hopewellian artifacts reported from the interior southeast. The Tunmo described here are mounds A, C, D, and E. The remaining mounds from the site are not prehistoric. Mound A was found to consist almost entirely of limestone rocks and lacked an inner clay core like the remaining mounds. The limestone rock used to build the mound weighed from 2 or 3 up to 100 pounds. Beneath the mound was, how did they carry that? Beneath the mound was a central pit, which contained burned human remains, along with a Hopewellian copper ear spool. A human mandible on the northern side of the mound was found near a strip of mica and a copper panpipe. Two further burials were found in the northern edge of Mount A, placed in rock-lined basins. Here we have a picture of a copper ear spools from Sparrow Mounds, Oklahoma, northern Cadone, Mississippian archaeological site located in eastern Oklahoma. Now, is it safe to say that those are ear spools? Think of, they had ear spools back then. Now, if I'm correct, aren't ear spools what keep the earrings from falling out? I don't have earrings, so I don't know. But isn't that what keeps the earrings from falling out? I'm pretty sure. I'm probably wrong. But that's really, if they are what keeps the earring from falling out, that's wild. Oh man, like I was saying, man, they're like, and imagine if these are like copper ear spools of a giant. Like, how wild would that be? Are they? Because I mean, because they're pretty big. Someone's got to tell me if ear spools. I'm gonna look this up. This is gonna bother me. I'm gonna look this up. Ear spools. Oh, okay. I mean, okay. What is it? Yeah. Thank you, Webster. Give me what is it? Oh, okay, okay. Ear spools. Those are the gauges, right? Yeah, okay. They're called the gauges. I know the hip kids. They call them gauges. Okay, so these are ear spools. So gauges for the oldies like me, the old souls. Gauges. I don't think anyone ever called them ear spools. Regardless, I'm getting off topic. I apologize. The artifacts from Mount A demonstrate the far-reaching connections of the Georgia Hopewell at Tunakane. For example, Hopewellian copper panpipes, sometimes also coated in silver, have been found throughout the Hopewell interaction sphere, from the southeast to Canada. Recent research suggests that these musical instruments were first crafted and used by Hopewell people in Wisconsin, from where they diffused to other groups. The same research suggests that the panpipes had different functions in different Hopewell communities across eastern North America. Hopewell copper ear spools, while most predominant in Ohio, are believed to be some researchers to have actually been first fabricated and worn by Middle Woodland Mound builders in Illinois or the Tennessee River Valley. The copper used by the Hopewell ear spools, panpipes, and other copper artifacts is generally considered to originate from the Great Lakes region. Huh. The copper ear spools and panpipes are perfect illustrations of not only the general hybrid nature of the Hopewell culture, which incorporated a diverse array of exotic artifact types from many far-flung regional traditions, but also long-distance connections of the woodland people buried at the Tunakane site. Interesting. Like I was saying, this it just yeah, this is it just keeps on getting weirder and weirder. Okay. Yeah, let's jump on to the sorry, I got forgot where I was at for a second. Next, we're gonna jump onto the this Mississippi cult. See what this is all about. All right. If you're enjoying the stream so far, please hit that like button. Much love to my Rumble watchers. I really appreciate you guys taking your time out of the day to enjoy this stream. Please hit that like button if you're enjoying the content so far, and please leave a comment with your thoughts below or some constructive criticism. All right. So this article was written May 20th, 2014 by Chickasaw. Cool name. The Rise and Fall of Moundville, the Mississippian Culture in Ancient America. The Moundville archaeological site, occupied from around 1120 CE until 1650 CE, was a large Mississippian settlement in the Black Warrior River in central Alabama. Many archaeologists and scholars believe that the Chickasaws and other tribes from southeastern United States descend from the Mississippian era inhabitants of Moundville. Much of the Chickasaw culture and the economic and political structure, as well as that of dozens of other tribes, were greatly influenced and shaped by mound building Mississippian civilization, which is named after the river valley in North America where this culture flourished. Complex societies emerged during the Mississippian period, which spans roughly 900 CE to 1400 CE. The hierarchical ranking of clans, family house groups, and lineages developed into permanent institutionalized status differences. Burgoyne elites controlled the regional chiefdoms and organized warfare, resulting in the displacement of large populations and the abandonment of some river valleys. The mass cultivation of corn began during this era as well, intensively planted and harvested in huge maize fields along rivers where fertile floodwaters enriched the soil annually. The chiefly aristocracy's domination of sedimentary population centers, long distance trade networks emanated from these developing societal changes. The systemic control of trade networks subsequently allowed them to acquire exotic objects such as copper plates with symbolic imagery, mica cutouts, and rare feathers, exotic ceramics, stone implements, and engraved marine shell art or ornaments. The Mississippian period marked the height of mound building, and mound and plaza architecture proliferated throughout the Mississippian Valley in present day southeastern and midwestern United States. Mound building evolved from round shaped domes used exclusively for the burial of important tribal members to flat top mounds that served as platforms to elevate temples or chiefly residences. Some mound sites were the metropolises of their day, with thousands or more people dwelling within the protection of a log palisade. Others were ceremonial centers where disappeared tribes would gather periodically for ceremonial events and celebrations. By 1250 CE, Moundville was one of the largest North American settlements north of Mexico and had a population of over 1,000. At its height, the mound-filled chiefdom extended for miles throughout the Blackwater River Valley. The site, comprised of 320 acres, was enclosed by a 20-foot tall protective palisade with bastions and featured a large central plaza with 29 earthen mounds ranging from 3 feet to 57 feet in height. The mounds are arranged in a bilateral symmetrical pattern reminiscent of a Chickasaw clan camp circle. The largest mounds are found on the northern end of the plaza, and repeating pairs of mounds complete the circle with a smallest mound on the southern end. The most highly ranked house groups occupy the northern end of the Chickasaw camp circle, while the lower ranked house groups were placed on the southern end. These similarities suggest the monumental earthen architecture of the Moundville site may be a representation of the social structure of its population. The town was fully occupied for some time, but the fall of the community was rapid, and scholars do not fully understand the rise of Moundville or its swift decline. Between 1300 CE and 1600 CE, Moundville underwent drastic changes. By the late 1500s, the area was no longer a fortified city and only sparsely populated ceremonial center and burial place remained. Various theories have been advanced to explain the decline, which could have been due to feuding leaders, warfare, the Little Ice Age, food shortages, diseases, or more general societal shift. For reasons that are not fully understood, Moundville inhabitants began to migrate away from the city permanently and disperse throughout the Black Warrior River Valley. They continued to retain much of the civilization's material culture. However, and people did return to bury their kin in a meaningful locations near the mounds, new archaeological developments that take tribal traditions into account could shed light on the specific circumstances that prompted Moundville's decline. But what is known is that the Moundville site was all but abandoned In the 16th century, the various groups and waves of people were deserted. Moundville continued to move and resettle throughout the area, possibly becoming parts of the Muscogee, Alabama, Choctaw, and Chickasaw tribes. The Moundville Archaeological Park now rests on the site. The park is comprised of 320 acres and contains prehistoric Mississippian-era Native American earthwork mounds and burial sites. It was declared a National Historic Landmark in 1964 and added in the National Registry of Historic Places in 1966. The Mountainville Museum was erected in 1939 and renovations were completed and yada yada yada. Okay, so they're saying the Native Americans, but since we've been uh, studying this information, we are now realizing that it seems like there was cohabitation with normal sized humans and these giants because as we've seen in previous articles talking about various graves, some of these graves had females that were only 5 feet tall. So I'm under the impression that there must have been some cohabitation going on within these various mound cities. How much cohabitation? I can't really say. And how many giants were still around? I'm not really sure. But it's clear that there was cohabitation going on. It would be foolish to say that there wasn't. There clearly was cohabitation going on. What I find really interesting about it personally uh, is the fact that they're not there. Well, not these people in particular, but there's no acknowledgement of the possibility of cohabitation. And I don't know if maybe they don't want to reach that far because you end up sounding kind of crazy. But I have no problem, with the way 2023 has been going. I have no problem being one of the crazy ones. But all I'm saying is that there is clearly was some cohabitation, and we don't even know because what's interesting in my you know light studies and research into elongated skulls. There is talk about them in France, Russia, um, uh, Rome or Italy, I should say, even the Middle East. But you don't really hear that much about them in the United States, even though it seems like there were at one point a race of elongated skull giants that were running amok. And I'm wondering if perhaps maybe um, these humanoid elongated skulls, not the giant versions, but the regular human versions of them, did not proliferate into North America. Perhaps they stayed in South America and ventured into um, Europe and Asia, because there are elongated skulls that were found in China as well. But even there, they're not sure if they want to say it's cranial deformation or not. There is a way to tell, and it all determines on the suture bone. All human heads, all human skulls have a suture bone that goes right down the back of your skull. And researchers, Brian Forster and many others have noticed that these elongated skulls, they don't have a suture bone in the back of their skull, which would indicate that they're not human, and would also further indicate that there was no forced cranial deformation. And so I'm just wondering here when we look at these the mound people, the mound builders of North America, you know, and they were living in that area up to the 16th century. So um, the Europeans were well on their way to making their way over to North America. So I think it's very interesting in regards to the possibility of cohabitation. And there, even in Florida, there were stories of cohabitation of humans and giants. Many stories about that. Florida is a really interesting place. It's a really, really interesting place. But let's wrap up this article. And while we are about to wrap it up, please make sure to hit that like button. And if you're new to the channel, please make sure to subscribe. And please leave a comment with your thoughts on this stream and any constructive criticism. Greatly appreciated. Okay. All right. There. Okay. Here we go. The denial of unique types. After the government and philanthropies took over American archaeology in the 1900s, the establishment undertook the policy of flatly denying the existence of anomalous remains. The actual beginning point of the revisionist tendency in the National Museum was very early. By 1851, E.G. Squier was working to debunk theories of pre-Columbian contact, and several decades later, Gerald Folk would attempt to jettison, discredit and jettison the work of virtually every researcher in the field up to his day, including the skeletal measurements of his fellow agents in the Bureau of Anthology. However, the denial of the unique types um, truly got underway during the reign of Alice Hrdlicka as a curator of anthropology at the Smithsonian of 1903. And this is him right here. The man you can thank for erasing true history. He erased true history. Hrdlicka seems to have made a hobby of constantly disparaging the notion that anomalous skeletons were ever found. They were done in scholarly works as well as public venues. I mean, look at this guy. He looks like an asshole. Quote, and the giant and 8-foot skeleton is to this day the almost stereotyped feature of many amateur reports to find a skeletal remains in Florida, as well as other parts of the country. All these reports, it may be said once and for all, are exaggerations. End quote. Dr. Hildrika, I don't know if I really want to call him a doctor, blames the will to believe of amateur anthropologists for many reports of discoveries which find their way to his office with monotonous frequency. Their prepared finds described a race of ancient giants between 7 and 8 feet tall with bones and jaws considerably larger than those living today, next to human giants. Dr. Hiller reports fancy finds its way with humans, dwarfs. Interesting, Hidrick's name appears in several reports of discoveries of gigantic skeletons during his tenure at the American Museum. The skeletons of these heretical unknown, quote, the skeletons of these hitherto unknown American aborigines showed they all ranged in height from 6 and 1.5 to 7 feet, excavating in sand dunes on the sun-sprayed Golden Isles, Georgia. Archaeologists have gored out the strange record of an amazing prehistoric race of giants. What manner of men were these? The members of these tribes all averaged 6.5 and 7 feet tall. Some of the first skulls to be discerned by Preston Holder have already been examined by the Smithsonian Institute by Dr. Alice Hidrick, foremost authority on North American types. Now, if you weren't here for my earlier stream and you're wondering why they're saying unknown American aborigines, that is because the original occupiers of North America, besides the giants, were dark-skinned people. In layman terms, black people. But at that time, during the early 1800s and 17th and late 1700s, they were considered aborigine because they are original and originate from North America. Um, if that's something you're interested in and learning more, I highly recommend you check out Dan Calloway's YouTube channel to learn more about that topic. That can be a little triggering to some people if I were to tell them that slave trade didn't really actually happen. But I digress. This was wild. I don't know about you guys, but this was wild and a lot of fun. And like I was saying, um, you know, there's a lot of evidence. And many of you guys out there who are a fan of these topics, you wouldn't be if you weren't listening. You know that the mainstream narrative and the alphabet agencies, uh, these alphabet programs, the government, they lie. They obfuscate the truth. They destroy the evidence. And I'm talking about our historical evidence, talking about the true history of North America, the true origins of our humanity. And they want us dumb, they want us ignorant, and they want to domesticate us into their train of thought, their train of thinking. And that type of train of thinking does not involve freedom of thought. It doesn't involve individuality. And with everything, the data and evidence has been presented here today, and learning that the Smithsonian had a plan of action for any discovery of giant bones was to pretend and lie that giants didn't exist, despite the fact that we have numerous amounts of evidence from actual archaeological remains of giants, and to all of these anecdotal research evidence presented to us from various articles written in the 1800s and the early 1900s. And if you were here for earlier, I see we got some new people joining in on Rumble. I really appreciate you guys coming in. Hit that like button if you're new to the channel and leave a comment. We covered all the actual evidence and archaeological remains of giants in the UK. So we have evidence of giants in the UK. We have evidence of giants in North America. There is even some evidence of giants. Well, actually, there is evidence of giants in South America as well, and evidence in um, in the Middle East. So we have all this evidence, all these articles confirming that giants exist, confirming that they were prolific within North America, they were prolific in Europe, they were prolific in South America. They were building these incredible cities. They were most likely cohabiting with humans and another extinct version of a humanoid race. So it's right there in front of you. Hence the reason why the title is the mainstream academia and the lost race of giants, because the mainstream academia has acknowledged and is aware of this. It's right there. You guys, the articles are right there for you. You can read this information yourself and make the decision yourself whether or not you want to believe it or take it into consideration. But you can't deny the fact that we know that these mainstream academia institutions and organizations, they destroy history. They will regulate history. They will propagandize history. They will dumb down history. And that's part of the many plans of Marxist socialist ideology. These elites to dumb down our history, to make it so dumb and so ignorant, and to not even necessarily play them as the victors, but more as play them as the arbiters of truth. And that's what you're seeing right now. And with these articles and this evidence and data that's out there, you guys can make your own decisions on who is the arbiter of truth. It damn sure well is not the US government or these educational institutions, because they're doing, they're doing more harm than good when it comes to our actual history and our knowledge of what it means to be human, and those who occupied North America, whether it's the Denisovans, whether it's the Hopewells, whether it's these giants. The fact remains is that we as individuals, we need to be more, we need to be more hands-on with our history of our personal cultures, our families, and where we live. If we do not take the time to be mindful and educated on the true culture, the true history of the of where we live and what we inhabit, then we're losing sight of one aspect of our humanity, and that is what it truly means to be human. And what it truly means to be human in relation to these other humans that lived before us and may still live with us. Whether you want to, go with the whole disclosure concept and the fact that, there are, aliens among us. I've seen videos, unfortunately they're deleted now, of people with giant hands, and some of these giants have, two rows of teeth or six fingers and six toes. And I have seen videos of what looked like a woman's hand, clearly a woman's hand, massive hand, and she had six fingers. And it was moving like a regular finger, nothing deformed about it, nothing out of the ordinary. If you, in a passing glance, you would think, huh? You would have to do a double take, but completely healthy hand. So, this idea that giants do not exist still, it's to me a little far-fetched. And even with this idea of the elongated skulls, these humanoids with elongated skulls, you know, the oh wow, the academic institutions in the UK have known about these extinct, elongated humanoids for probably now over 200 years, probably close to 200 years now. Yeah. So this idea that the mainstream academia is not aware of these things, they are aware. Some of this stuff that we just looked at, you could go online, go on to these various organizations, research and look up this data yourself and pull it up. It's not like they destroyed it all. It's just that they documented it and then suppress it. So my whole thing is for anyone out there, for everyone who's listening, shout out to people on Rumble. I really appreciate you guys. Shout out to Twitch and Kick and YouTube. I really appreciate you guys hanging out with me. Like, we as individuals, we got to look at this information and really start questioning our own narrative. Really, and I'm not a blue pill, red pill, white pill. I'm not any of those pills. All right. I'm just me. I'm human. All right. But I think that for all of us out there, we need to have a level of accountability towards the truth that's being told to us. We got to call it out. We got to call out the lies that are in front of us. We got to call out the hypocrisy that's in front of us. And that doesn't mean using, cruelty or vitriol or hateful words or malice. It means holding people accountable. It means just calling people out. Calling out these institutions, calling them out on their lies and their deceit, on their unethical and immoral behaviors towards our history. And that's all I'm saying. All I'm saying is, hey, this stuff is right there for you. It's in front of you. It's real. There's no mistaking the reality of it. But like I said, it's up to you to decide on how are you gonna take this information? How are you gonna disseminate it between yourself, your friends, your own personal well-being? How are you going to move forward with this information? I'm not here how to tell you how to think or how to feel. I'm just here to provide you guys with the information and to let you guys make the necessary steps that you need in order to, you know, digest that information. But my whole thing is that we got to be open-minded about our history, and we have to know um, that they're lying to us. You know, real quick, I have a photo of I have a screenshot. I'll pull it up for you guys real quick before we log out. Um, I got a screenshot from the video. I should have screen recorded the video. Um, and I don't know if that YouTube video of the hand um is still up. I don't think it is. Let's see, where you at? Give me a moment. Found it. Okay, done. Look at that. Let me get it smaller for you guys, just a little bit more. Look. Now in the video, this woman's hand, it's moving like no problem. Look at that. There's 6 fingers. And in the stories, even in the Bible, the giants, Nephilim, they have 6 fingers. So, I'm not, none of this stuff is like crazy when I say that they may still be alive. Here's a photographic evidence of a giant's hand. Make of it of you will. I'm not like I said, I'm not here to tell you how to think, but I'm here to present evidence and let you guys make a decision on what that means. Because you see the picture of the hand, you can tell there's nothing deformed about her hand. It doesn't seem like there's any real issues. Damn, I wish I had the video because the video is crazy. But the point I'm trying to make is that it's real. That's all I'm trying to say. It's real. Whether or not you want to make it real within your reality, that's up to you. Like I said, I'm an essential realist. I don't deal in the false reality. The false reality is the mainstream narrative, the mainstream media. That's the false reality. I deal in the essential reality, and in the essential reality, we acknowledge the truth. We acknowledge the true history. And my whole point of bringing this photo up is so that everyone who's been watching, we just got another follower on Rumble. I really appreciate that. Hit that like button if you just subscribed. Much love. This really warms the soul and warms the heart and motivates me to keep on pumping out content for you guys. But like I'm saying here, it's right there in front of you. Even what about the giant of Kandahar? I don't know how many of you guys have heard about the giant of Kandahar. The incident with the special forces unit that went looking for another unit, and when they picked up their trail, all they found was remains, bloody gear, and then all of a sudden one of them gets speared through the chest by a giant, and then they end up unloading magazines on him. So there's that story you could look up on it. Supposedly there's an interview with one of the spec ops soldiers. Whether or not it's true, I'm not here to tell you that. But this photo is real. This is a screenshot from a video, and I tell you, the video it's not edited. There's nothing unedited about this video or anything like that. It's not like CGI or anything like that. I mean, I watched the video countless times. And on top of that, there is another video of this exact hand, but doing something completely different. So I know that it's not fake, and it's not CGI. Many of you guys out there who are following, you've seen CGI. You know how good it looks, and you know how shitty it looks. And I'm talking to you, Disney, Star Wars, Marvel. I'm talking to you guys. But my whole point here is like, that there is a hand of what we would consider a giant. Now, throughout this entire presentation, there have been countless information and data that have been presented to you guys acknowledging the fact that giants existed, acknowledging the fact that they um, proliferated most of the Midwest. And we also discussed the giants of the UK in Britain. So I'm not saying anything crazy. In fact, I'm actually probably the most sane right now. You may think the information I'm presenting you is crazy. Sure, it's crazy, but it's only crazy because you're not willing to. And I'm not trying to be disrespectful or anything to anyone, but I'm not picking on anyone. But I'm just saying you're not willing to be open minded with your reality, with your truth. I know that sounds weird. Whatever. I don't even remember what I said, but like the whole point I'm saying is like you have to be open minded. And I think it's funny to me how like you can have people out there, right, who will like believe that certain medical needle is safe and effective, right? Even though we know it's causing extreme amounts of pain and suffering. But then at the exact same time, and then people will tell you, hey, don't take that thing. It's dangerous. It could kill you. It could do all sorts of horrible things. And you tell them they're a conspiracy theorist, but then in the exact same vein, you're convinced that aliens are real. It can't work like that. Like you have to be consistent with your logic and consistent with your thought process and your belief system. And that's my whole point really of Lounge Ronin, all things, everything. When we discuss these topics, is to challenge your foundational belief system. That's my goal. Is to challenge your foundational belief system. Because we as humans, we as individuals, if we do not challenge our foundational belief system, we don't grow. We don't evolve. We don't become the best versions of ourselves. And that is what's extremely important about challenging your foundational belief system. Nobody wants to challenge their foundational belief system nowadays. Why? Well, because it's considered heresy. It's considered blasphemy. You're considered racist or misogynistic or sexist if you challenge people's foundational belief systems. Right? And I'm sure many of you out there who are listening to the live stream, you've challenged people's foundational belief systems by presenting them evidence and information. And in many ways, you end up losing people. I'm sure plenty of us out there have lost people because we challenged their foundational belief system. And because they weren't willing to be open-minded to us and to support our belief system and just to engage us in conversations, they're showing you their true colors. You end up finding out they weren't really your friends. And then they're bad mouthing you behind your back. Or they're ridiculing you. Or they stay your friend, but they constantly ridicule and make fun of you or talk down about things that you enjoy and believe. And that's not fair and that's not right. And we have so many people nowadays, right now, who have, as I like to put it, they've drank in the Kool-Aid. Right? They are part of the hive mentality. And the moment you start, speaking rhetoric or presenting data that conflicts the hive mentality, you're obfuscated. You're shut out. You're exiled. You look at it with the airline passenger pilots who for decades could not speak out against all the crazy stuff they were seeing in the sky because they would lose their license. They get blacklisted. I mean, it's same here with. I mean, look what happened with Graham Hancock. He's not. Look what happened with Graham Hancock. They called him a white supremacist. The man's married to an Indian woman. Why? Because he challenged the mainstream narrative, and he ended up being right. And after his show came out on Netflix, they did everything they could to destroy this man, to call him a racist, a sexist, everything. He's banned from going to Egypt, because he telling the truth. I mean, it's crazy to me. And even for individuals like ourselves, any of us who are listening, you have experienced that yourself. This cancellation of your thoughts And sometimes you don't even believe it. You're just expressing an opinion or an idea. And then you're canceled for it because you're challenging their foundational belief systems. And people don't want their foundational belief system challenged because once it crumbles, that's it. That's the problem with people who have given up their entire individuality, their entire personality to the hive mentality. Once they do that, and you destroy that hive mentality that they have claimed onto, they don't have anything left. They gave up their previous identity, who they were as an individual. And all I'm saying here is that you don't want to fall into that category. None of us want to end up in that category. And some of us, even including myself, were part of that. I would be lying if I didn't say that there was a time where I was drinking the Kool-Aid and had a bit of a hive mentality. I would be lying to myself and to you guys if I didn't experience that myself. I did. But I got out of it. But you have to want to get out of that hive mentality. You have to choose to want to do it. And so many people, we've all had those conversations with people where you'll give them the data, you'll have a reasonable conversation, and they'll go, "No, yeah, wow, you're right, damn, but," and they always do that, "but I'm still gonna do it. I'm still gonna take it. I'm still gonna da 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 da," and they'll give you all their excuses, and it's really just cope. It's just coping because you shattered the foundation. You shattered their belief system. Like this photo here. I don't know how many people who happen to just casually look up and then there's a hand with 6 fingers and they're like, wait, what? And that photo looks really recent. It's not like it's a photo from the 80s or the 90s. I can assure you that that is a 2000 video. Early, not even early, late 2000s. There are multiple videos of this woman showcasing her hand, but you never see the face. So I'm just saying that you guys can take time and look this stuff up, um, and reread these articles for yourselves. Look up the information from these articles. Look up these people. The Y Files. They did an incredible episode on the Grand Canyon and the fact that there are Egyptian um, artifacts in the Grand Canyon, among other crazy things. And he called them up, and he even asked him about the giants. And the Smithsonian was like, "Yeah, no, we don't do giants." And the woman hung up on him. So so they the whole plan is this is why it's like an open secret. You have so many things that are open secrets that people are acting like they don't exist. Giants, elongated skulls. I mean, you take your pick, and it's right there in front of you. People like to mock the whole concept of flat Earth. I'm like, well, I mean, have you looked at some of the old teachings? Teachings? Have you looked at some of the old, drawings? Even with the concave Earth or the hollow Earth, I should say. I kind of like the whole concave hollow Earth idea personally, but that's just me personally. But we have all of these ideas, these stories, these narratives, and we look back at history. I mean, and then it ends up being confirmed. Remember when everyone thought that the Battle of Troy was just a myth? Just a tale, the Iliad, um, that it was just a tale. And then archaeologists discover a portion of the Trojan Wall. So how often is it that the legends become truth? How often? And that's my whole point here. And that quote, it's a Star Wars quote. It's actually from Ahsoka. I know the Ahsoka show is. Listen, I understand if you're a Disney Star Wars fan, you hurting right now because I don't know what the hell they doing over there. But I digress. She has a wonderful quote, Ahsoka, and I like this quote. And it's there is a bit of truth in legends, and that's the whole point. You know, there are so many legends that are becoming truth. So many conspiracies are becoming real. And this to me is one of them that is an open secret that is well documented, and people are acting as if it's not truth. When in reality, the truth is as real as the legends. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Lounge Rōnin. All things, everything. If you're new to the channel and you've made it this far, please hit that like button and make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. And go ahead and share this stream with any like-minded individuals. And please leave a comment with your thoughts and some constructive criticism. And for the new people that join me on Rumble, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. And for YouTube, much love. Rumble, much love. Twitch, much love. Kick, much love. And until next time, stay positive, stay focused, stay true, and much